Well, as we said earlier, this is Brent Allen Winters. This is In Church, INNCHURCH. Meeting on Sunday morning. We're going through the laws of nature unwritten, and the laws of nature's God written. The laws of nature's God unwritten, and of course, these phrases taken from our Declaration of 76. They were coined during the Scottish Enlightenment that overtook all of the English-speaking world, including all of England and all of the United States. The foremost proponent of the Scottish Enlightenment in England was a fellow by the name of John Locke. John Locke. The greatest fan in America of John Locke was Thomas Jefferson, chief drafter of our Declaration of 76. And that's why those phrases appear there, because he took some of the phrases and some of the words and even some of the ideas from John Locke. Tom Jefferson said, I didn't plagiarize anything from John Locke, but it's just that I sat down at that time and all of the things that I've read in my life and all of my considerations and my conclusions, that's called your conscience, I just wrote it down. I just drafted it out, and then I started to buff it up. Well, John Locke, he said, of course, was one of the three greatest mortals that ever lived. That means from the time he was a very young teenager up to the time he wrote or drafted the Declaration, he had inundated himself with the writings of John Locke for all of those years. He was a fan of John Locke. So it just naturally came out, the things that John Locke said, the phrases. There is nothing that has been said that has not been said before. There is nothing that has been said that is being said that has not been said before. You see, we talked a while ago about Kipling when he was a young man going to visit Mark Twain in Connecticut. He observed that. Of course, he became famous writing things, and he wrote a poem making the point that everything he said he heard someplace else. You give credit when you can, you don't plagiarize, but he wrote a poem called, shucks, I can't remember the name of the poem, but here's the poem. When Homer, that's the way the English people say Homer. You know, Homer was an ancient, he's the most ancient Greek writer we have the writings from, about between 800 and 900 BC. Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And he said, when Homer smote his bloomin' lyre, he writes in the dialect of the Cockney from London, so it's slang, very much slang English. When Homer smote his bloomin' lyre, means when he played his lyre, it's a stringed instrument. He'd heard men sing by land and sea, and what the thought he might require, he went and stole, same as me. The market girls and fishermen, the shepherds and the sailors too, they heard old songs turn up again, but kept it quiet, same as you. They knew he stole and he knew they knowed, but they didn't tell nor make a fuss, but winked at Homer down the road, and he winked back, same as us. So when we talk about, for example, people talk about the founding fathers said this or that, they're just saying what they'd heard somebody else say. When DJ Trump says something, he's just saying what he heard somebody else say, and he's heard a lot of stuff. And when Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, the only fear we have, how do you say it? Now I can't even remember how he said it, but he said, fear itself is what we should not fear. What destroys us is fearing fear. Was that what he said? Well, something like that. Well, I found that quote in an ancient Greek writer. No, he said this: the only legitimate fear is to fear itself. In other words, stay away from fear. It's complicated in the way he set it upside down. Some of you are going to look it up and say, okay, Brent, I'm going to put it in chat. Here's how the man said it. Well, he didn't say it. He was quoting one of the ancient Greek authors, but people attribute it to him. But there's nothing that has been said that has not been said before. Well, who said that? Did I say that? No. I'm quoting Solomon out of the Bible. He essentially said there's nothing been said that hadn't been said before. So when you hear me talk here, just remember, I ain't saying anything new. I'm just saying things I've heard other people say and read what they've said. And I'm just repeating what I've heard and nothing new. And I keep saying the same thing over and over and over again in different ways. Maybe tell a different story, make a different way of saying it, but I'm not saying anything new. Profound it may be, but I didn't say it to start with. That's why my favorite quote is, people say, is that a quote? He who never quotes is never quoted. And that is a quote. That's one of my favorite quotes. He who never quotes is never quoted. I know who I heard say it, but I don't know where he heard it. And he didn't say, or maybe he did say. You see, the thing is, if you quote somebody else and give credit, people will quote you as though you said it. That's the way it works. Don't ask me why. It's a law of nature. He who never quotes is never quoted. Well, the truth is ancient. It's everlasting. It's as old as time, older than time. It is the mind of God himself. And he is the one that has no beginning and no ending. There never was a time that he did not know all that could be known, all that is knowable. He never learned anything. You can't teach him anything. He's all self-sufficient. He doesn't need us. We need him. He doesn't need our money. We need his. He doesn't need our help. We need his. He's one of the attributes of God. He is 190% self-sufficient emotionally, physically, as a matter of wealth. He needs nothing from nobody. He's self-sustaining. That's what the Bible teaches. We're the created ones. We're the ones that are dependent. He's not dependent on anything or anybody. Having no one to swear by greater than himself, says the book of Hebrews in the Newer Testament. Having no one to swear by, you got to have somebody greater than yourself to swear by him. He didn't have that. So he swears by himself. On my name, on my authority, I swear. And he did. He swore that he would save his elect, his people. He would give them a new birth. He would set them free. He would enlighten their minds. He would inhabit their organs and their bones and their flesh, the body of the man whom he has chosen and given the new birth to by the Spirit. Miss Francine, what is, I know you usually write it down, and I didn't look apparently in time. Oh, don't say it. I got it, 207. I want you to know that I do have the ability technically to look it up. I can do that much. But it's there, yeah, 207. Now we're going to talk first about the laws of nature, as our declaration says, and that's unwritten. Then we're going to talk about the laws of nature's God, the Bible. And we're going to go, to, Lord willing, to Exodus chapter 21. But the laws of nature, unwritten, our common law tradition, our Constitution of the United States is a solid stepping stone of a very thin slice of our common law tradition called the common law of government. How government is supposed to operate. That's our Constitution of the United States, but it wasn't made out of hope. No geniuses wrote this. No. I know you hear that. Oh, these guys were all geniuses. Well, number one, there were no IQ tests back then. Nobody knows. And number two, the IQ test is not God's test of genius. Doesn't really mean, people say, George Washington had an IQ of 220. I've read that. That is absolute malarkey. Even if he did, nobody knows. And I know some really dumb things he did. I've read history. God used him. Some of those founding fathers were, well, a few of them are scoundrels, Bill, and anything you'd want your daughters to get near. Why? Because they're sinners just like you. That's why. But God used them. God used them. Let's not be silly about our approach to history, but let's be Godward, Godward, and see that God orchestrates sinful man to do his will. He makes straight licks with crooked sticks. That's us. Well, let's get on with it. So this is the laws of nature. We're going through the Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. Catechism, written by Arthur J. Stansbury, a preacher from the year 1828. Very popular as far as catechisms of the Constitution go, of the United States. Our Constitution is a brief of common law government. 207, does the President of the United States receive anything for his services? Does the President of the United States receive anything for his services? Answer. Number 1, he receives the honor of filling so high an honorable station by the choice of a great and free militia. That's us, the people. And if the militia is free, friends, you are too. Don't forget that. The folk understood that back then. Well, actually, it says people here, but who is the people? Well, I can show you quotes over and over and over and over, ad infinitum, ad nauseum, of the folks that ratified our Constitution. They say the people is the militia, and the militia is the people. I can take you to the Bible. Every time you see the word people, the people of God, God says, my people, 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 hundreds of times, every time, almost every time. I think every time I've checked, and I've checked hundreds in the Old Testament, the word people is a translation of the Hebrew word my people, ami, the people, ha'am. It's always the same root though, people. And in every case, that Hebrew word signifies an armed group of men, armed group of men. The militia of the 12 several tribes of Israel, it's used to denote the militia of the 12 several tribes of Israel, each tribe of the 12 having a militia, mustering of militiamen. It's used to refer to that in the Bible more than any other thing. Is it any wonder that that group of folk that Winston Churchill called the most biblical race of men that ever lived, the Puritans? Is it any wonder them, and I have to include the Presbyterians too? They were involved in the translation of the Geneva Bible before the King James. There were men from Scotland, men from Wales, men from England that fled to Geneva, Switzerland to keep getting their heads rolling off their shoulders. And they got together and they had the wherewithal and the training and the understanding, and they translated the Bible into English. And they translated that word, meaning militia. That's a Latin word. They put it in the English and said people. People. Also in our Germanic tongue, the word folk, F-O-L-K, means militia. And that was the word that was used before people. The folk. In the Dutch countries and the Germanic and the Scandinavian countries, it's called, they don't say folk, they say Volk with a V as in Victor. Like the Volkswagen. Remember the Volkswagen? By the way, I just heard a fellow say, well, I'm talking to a man who'd been working on cars for years. He said, don't bring me, he used to work on everything. He said, I won't allow a Mercedes-Benz into my shop. They were bought out by a French company, he said, and they're trash. Bought out by a French company, they're trash. They weren't trash. I've got a 1978 79 Mercedes-Benz, had it for over 20 years. It's not trash. Got pretty near 500,000 miles on it. But they're trash now, he said, Mercedes. Chevrolets are trash. Chryslers are trash. He said, I won't work on them. He's about ready to retire. He's been doing it for years. I said, what about the Toyota? He said, that's a good car. Toyota. What about the Audi? Yeah, that's a good car too, because the Volkswagen company bought Audi. Volkswagen, Audi, solid machines, he said. The only American-made car that has any reliability to it, he said, is the Ford. And that really irked him and chapped his buns, he said, because he said he'd been a Chevy man all his life, a GM, General Motors man. That we grew up that. You know, when I was growing up, it was a point of pride. It's like, well, do you root for the Cardinals or the Cubs? You know, it was that kind of thing. Well, people get real serious about some of that stuff. Well, that's the way it was with automobiles for you younger folk. But us boomers after World War II, us babies that were born during that time, there were only three possibilities that if you owned a vehicle in America: Chrysler, Ford, and GM, which included Chevy. Chrysler included Pontiac and some of those other subsidiaries, but Chrysler, Ford, and GM. And it was a point of pride to say, well, our family drives Chevys. We don't drive Fords. Ford stands for fix or repair daily. We don't do that. Those are trash. Other people say, yeah, I don't drive Chryslers. I drive Fords because everything on a Chrysler is backwards. When you go to turn the key in the ignition, instead of turning it to the right like you do in a Ford and Chevy, you had to turn it to the left. And if you go to open the door, instead of lifting up the handle like you do on a Ford and a Chevy, on a Chrysler, you had to push the handle down. When you go to spool the window down, you went the opposite direction of the Ford and Chevy. Why that was, I don't know. Then Chrysler, of course, they had those Ram pickup trucks that were pretty reliable, but this guy told me, no, it's not even that anymore. They're just trash. But he said of the Fords, he said they're reliable, except, he said, that for what it's worth, this is for free, except, he said, the Ford diesel 6-cylinder, not reliable. And I don't know, I haven't followed in recent years, but I assume he's talking about a pickup truck. But the other pickup trucks are good, the Ford pickups. But the Volkswagen's on the upswing, Mercedes out the picture. French company, I forget the name of that French company that bought them. They just worthless as nipples on a boar hog. Did he say that? I'm quoting somebody else on that one. I forget who said that. He who never quotes is never quoted. Well, we're talking about the Constitution of the United States. I've been jabbering a long time here. Holy mackerel. Whew, 940. Well, 207, the honor of, what does he get for being president? He gets the honor of doing his duty and filling a high and honorable station by the choice of a great and free people, and he gets the glory of leaving his name in their history as a faithful friend and of his country. Well, this isn't the Bible. He's just flat wrong there. Joe Biden did not leave his name in history. Neither did his Obama Ben, whatever his name was, that Arab that was sitting in the White House. Neither did Bill Clinton. Neither did Lyndon Johnson. Neither did FDR. Neither did Woody Wilson. Nothing honorable there. Nothing honorable. I had somebody say yesterday, John Kennedy was a good president. This is too simple. There's some things that are a matter of debate. That's not a matter of debate. He talked everything the conservatives wanted. He said he was against all the National Bank, the Federal Reserve. He said he was against all secret societies. Why? Even, by the way, did you know that John Kennedy supported his name was McCarthy, wasn't it? Yeah, McCarthy. As a matter of fact, McCarthy and the Kennedy family were like this. And I believe McCarthy's children, one of the Kennedy brothers was godfather to McCarthy's children, that McCarthy was a Romanist as they were. Why did John Kennedy support McCarthyism? Because in that day, everybody in he was U.S. Senator, and everybody in Massachusetts would have thrown his carcass out of office if he didn't support McCarthy and the anti-communist stance. Did he believe it? No, he hated it. He was a left-wing communist. He was a socialist. No, he was a communist. Oh, like it said, what's the difference? Well, a socialist, if you got two milk cows, a socialist will take one, milk it, and give the milk away and leave you the other cow. But a communist will take both cows and shoot you to get you out of the picture. That's really the way they were. They were willing to do that. They were willing to go in the Roosevelt days, the Kennedy was the same way. Kennedy got into office after he supported McCarthyism, anti-communism. And then what did he do? As soon as he got power, he fired the general, ruined his career, the general in charge of the armed forces in Europe. And we, at that time, after World War II, we had a lot of armed forces in Europe, in Germany. Occupation forces. Well, the fellow that was in charge there is from Texas, and he was a graduate of New Mexico Military Institute. I think that was the name of it. I'm not sure. But then he went to West Point. He was a career man. World War II hero. Well, he distinguished himself. I like the way to say it that way better. Hero is a biblical word, and it's a word that has to do with the Antichrist, but in a big way. It is the definition of Antichrist. But he distinguished himself, very much a patriot. He just fired him. Why? Because he was teaching the troops under his command in Germany about communism, what it was, what is Bolshevikism. Well, Kennedy's power base was the communists, just like FDR's power base was the communist. We're the communist. Anyway, that you can figure it out. You grammar Nazis out there. Roosevelt's economic base, his political base, being from New York, was the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where the Bolsheviks, where their center of operation in the world was. That's not a matter of debate. It's just truth. You read the history, not like anybody's hiding it. Well, the same thing with Kennedy. He had to support McCarthy politically because people wouldn't allow him to stay in office. But when he got into the presidency, he showed his true colors. He had full power. He did any blasted thing he wanted. And he fired that fella because he was holding classes to teach about communism and the dangers of communism. Kennedy didn't like that. Fired him. Well, then he went back home after an illustrious, matter of fact, he's the one that was in charge. This general was in charge of all the 101st Airborne that coming out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. He was in charge of the 101st Airborne, in command of them, and in command of the militia of the state of Arkansas when President Eisenhower called out the militia and the 101st Airborne to protect this little girl down there. Her name was Brown, and she was brown, by the way. She was colored brown. Her skin was brown. Her name was Brown. Easy to remember, isn't it? Brown versus Board of Education. And President Eisenhower decided he would support that Supreme Court decision and protect that little girl while she was going to school at an all-white school. All Caucasian. She was Negro. Let's make it clear. That's what happened. And this man was in charge of the troops to protect her. The 101st Airborne was sent in. Oh, by the way, Eisenhower sent the 101st Airborne from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. But he gave orders that if all the Negro members of the 101st Airborne had to stay home. Now you think about that one. Times were different, friends. And I'm just telling you what his order said. That was the words he used. I'm quoting. I like to quote. Times were different back in the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s. And into the 80s a little bit. It was a world that was different. And when you lived in it, you saw things much differently. And when you live in a world like that, I don't criticize people much, not like a lot do, about racism. They don't understand racism. They don't understand the dynamic between the black man and the white man in America back at those days. I have a clue. There were things that were bad. Of course, the worst things happened in the Deep South. Deep South. Upper Alabama, upper Mississippi, upper Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky. Things didn't happen that way, Virginia. No. And up in the lower part of the Ohio Valley, there was an antipathy there, a copperhead attitude when I was growing up. If you weren't Caucasian in that little town where I went to high school, if you were other than Caucasian, city ordinance did not allow you to be on the street after sundown. Why? Well, if you didn't live then, there's no sense trying to explain it. Was it racism? Not in every case, but those sundown laws were part of America in thousands upon thousands of towns and villages all over the country. That's nothing new. Well, why did that happen? Well, I'll let you go read about it. Let's talk about ignoring history is not going to change it. And it's not going to change the future either, my friends. You ignore history, you're just going to do it over again. And that's what the wackos on the left want to do. Why do they want to do that? Because they're under the control of the devil himself. You think not? That's why they're called useful idiots. If you're following doctrines of demons, political policies that are wrong, those the Bible calls those doctrines of demons. Do you believe the book? That's what it says. Where do they come from? They come from the father of all lies. That's a quote from the Bible. Who is the father of all lies? The Bible calls him Satan. Satan. The wily beware, the backbiter, the liar. That word Satan means all those things. The fiendish one. That means that too. He'll reduce you to thraldom. You'll love it. You'll love being his slave. Well, you get to be, that's what the presidency does, enough to fill the wishes of the most aspiring mind. And no doubt the place would be sought. The place, the presidency of the United States, one would seek it as eagerly as it now is, though not a dollar should be given to the man who fills it. They still want to be president. A lot of men would be president of the United States. But because his station exposes him to great expenses, he is allowed a salary sufficient to meet those expenses. He is allowed a salary. When I was back in the 70s, I remember when Dick Nixon resigned from the presidency. I remember the salary at that time was, well, before that time, it had been $100,000 a year. Dick Nixon, Congress during his presidency, raised it to $200,000 a year. And that lasted a long time after that. I think it's up to $400,000 a year. And then they added to it a blasted pension that should have never been done. Should have never been done. Because his station, his position exposes him to expenses. It says here, no doubt the place would be sought as eagerly as it now is. People want to be president. That's why they run for the office, and they run hard, except Joe Biden. He didn't run. He just stayed in his basement. They didn't want him to be out where anybody could see him. He was a insane, brainless lackey for evil men. So was Hillary. Don't you remember Hillary would just, on the camera, they had camera of her where she'd be in a crowd of people and just go off, and her eyes would go up in the air, and she'd be looking at the ceiling and talking like a mad woman. And they had her so doped up on drugs that they trying to keep her going and put on a positive presentation. And they came out to put her in her van once, and all the security was around her. She's running for president. And she was stumbling and she couldn't walk, and they were trying to keep the cameras from seeing her by getting between her and the cameras. And then she collapsed and flopped down into the side door of the van, and they had to pick her chunky carcass up and throw her in. She was puffed out with opiates. Pretty pathetic, isn't it? How do people get away with that? Because we're stupid, that's why. At least half of us would have voted for the old witch. I don't say that as a slander. I just say it as a fact. The Bible uses that word. God uses it. He wants me to recognize what he's saying. I try to be very careful in my definitions, though. I don't just call everybody a witch. There are witchy people, of course, yeah. If it's a man, we call them warlocks. That's the English word. What is the amount of the president's salary? That is, the sum of money paid to him by the United States every year. Now, this was in 18 and 28. What was the president's salary? Here it is, $25,000 a year. That's what he got back then. But you got to remember, a dollar was worth quite a bit back then, a lot. When I was in school, I'd come home and my Aunt Bessie went for a Thanksgiving dinner one time. And she said, Brent, you'd have to stand up twice to make a shadow. My nickname was Beanpole. Well, there was more than one reason that by that time that I was Beanpole. I was in school and I didn't have any money, and I could buy a pot pie about as big around, a little bigger around than this cup, a chicken pot pie with a few veggies in it for 27 cents. I remember 27 cents. And I could buy a bag of peanuts from the machine. That bag of peanuts about yay tall. I could buy that for a nickel. And that's what I'd eat every day. If I could find something else, I'd eat it, but that's all I'd eat. I did that for quite a while, trying to stay in school, didn't have any money. But one time I came home, and Mom, of course, she's worried about me. And I was going out the door, and she slipped a $5 bill to me, said, here, take this. Hoping I'd go buy 8 or 10 hamburgers, probably. And I took the money and used it for food, but had to have enough gasoline to get back too. I was driving a 63 Chevy sedan 4-door with a 6-cylinder motor in it. Didn't use a lot of gas, but it took money. Gas then, I remember, gas was less than 30 cents a gallon. You say, well, that's nothing. Well, no, but I remember we were driving and my cousin Kent was with me, and he made the comment at that time. He said, I don't know if we're going to be able to continue doing this. We were both sharing gas money. I said, why? What do you say that? Gas was less than 30 cents a gallon then. He said, well, I heard in the news, gasoline is going to go up to 35 cents a gallon. He was worried. Well, that was a lot of money. Mom gave me that $5 bill, and I was out talking to her the other day, and we were calculating what I could buy with it back then. With $5, you could buy, at that time, you could buy a dollar and be 10. You could buy 50 bottles of pop. 50. That'd be over 2 cases of soda pop with $5 bill. You could buy 100 candy bars. I'd slip in one of those once in a while. They were nickel piece. Where I was getting them, they were nickel. Pretty good deal. But still, it was a lot of money lasted. Money was worth something. $25,000, multiply that by quite a bit. You could probably go to the computer and figure out what that'd be worth today, but it'd be a lot. Question 209. What is the amount of the president's salary? Oh, I did that already. Question 209. May the president receive any other money from the United States or from any one state? Answer, no. He is expressly forbidden to receive any other sum of money than his salary. Period. What does that mean? That means no bribes. No bribes. What's a bribe? At common law, in our country, a bribe a bribe is something given to a government official for a favor. A bribe is something given to a government official for a favor. People say, I'll give somebody some money because they helped me or something. Well, you don't have to bribe him. Well, that's not a bribe, and there's no law against it. That's not a bribe. He's not working for the government. I'm not looking for a government favor. I had an oil driller at home and went to school with his daughter. Word around was that he was worth over $90 million. He lived in an old farmhouse. I put up hay in the barn for him when I was a teenager. Helped put up hay, not just me. We had a whole crew. Everybody loved him. Dad loved him. He was kind, giving fellow. He had his problems. In other words, he was a sinner like the rest of us, and it was obvious. But my point is, he was a man who had a lot of money, but he didn't put on the dog and didn't look like he had a lot of money. He drove an old pickup truck, took care of his family. I went to school with his daughter. She was a sweetheart, by the way. Betsy. Always liked Betsy. Because she wasn't uppity either, but her father had a lot of money, and he told the story. He was an oil driller. Of course, being in the oil business, you drill wells, you begin to see where you might want to drill one yourself. And every time he'd poke a hole in the ground, the black gold would run out. But he said he started drilling young. I'll tell you a story about bribery. And he said, I don't remember where I got the money, but somehow I finagled. I had one old broken down drilling rig, and he did. And I had 4 $100 bills. And that was it. I had the clothes on my back, and I was worried about how I was going to feed what children I was bringing into the world. And he married a girl that grew up right there where I went to church when I was growing up. There was a church, then there was the country store right at the T Road, right where the church was, and then there was a school there, a little one-room schoolhouse there. My granddad taught school there. Well, her family ran that store. It was north of Moonshine, by the way. The Williams family ran the Moonshine store. I went to school with their daughters too. They were a couple of lookers, pretty girls. Well, Betsy was that way, but her mother grew up there at that store. Her folks ran that store at White Oak. Well, story was he had the rig, had four $100 bills, didn't have anything else. He heard that Ohio Oil Company was looking for a driller. So they had the pipeline division and the production division, and the largest above ground oil reserve in the world was right there. It's not anymore, but it was right there north of Moonshine, where I grew up. And he went into the office there where the tank farm was, and the fellow was taking bids for drilling, and he said, I don't know what you want, but I got a rig, and he said, I can do it. And he asked him some questions, and he stood up, and Betsy's dad stood up and said he took those $400 bills out of his pocket and laid it on the fellow's desk, and he said, I appreciate your time, and left. Was that bribery? Was it a crime? No. That wasn't a government official that he gave that money to. There's no crime there at all. If he wanted to do that, he could do that. The other fellow could accept it or reject it. Didn't make any difference, no crime to it. Just to make the distinction, bribery only has to do with government officials. But for a government official, a judge, a president, a governor, a congressman, a state legislator, a bureaucrat, anybody, to accept anything from somebody gives the appearance of bribery and should never, ever, ever be done. In other words, if you're working for the government, you got a salary, that's all you get. But usually when you work for the government, you've got a good salary and you got a lot of perks and benefits to go along with it. And if you don't want to work for the government, you don't think they're giving you enough, leave and go someplace else. But don't be trying to rake things off the top and get people to give you things. Why? Because it's wrong. That's why. According to the Bible makes much of that too. Let's do one more question, Miss Francine, and maybe we can hear a song. Well, question 210. We'll finish this from Miss Francine, then we'll start with 211 next time. Oh boy, yeah, 211 would be a good place to start. Okay, why is he forbidden to receive any other sum of money than his salary? Answer: this is the President of the United States. Lest, it says, if any state allow him money, he might be led to favor that state more than the other states. And lest, if he has suffered to receive other sums from the United States, he might amass so much money as should make him a dangerous citizen to a free country. Is that true? Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's why I was talking about President Kennedy. He wasn't elected president, number one. No, he cheated. 20,000 ghost votes out of the graveyards in Cook County, Illinois, put him in office. At his behest, in his connection with the mob bosses in Chicago. And as soon as he got into office, he appointed his punk kid brother, who had never practiced law, Attorney General of the United States. He had promised the mob who put him in office that he would leave them alone. That was the deal. And as soon as he got his Attorney General brother in place, he told him to go after the mob. And then people wonder why somebody shot him. This is too easy, friends. Again, the reason there's so much fuss and people act like they don't know and want to argue about it is because it creates money for a whole lot of people to keep that mess going. That's what happened. There were other people that wanted him dead too, but that's what happened. He didn't get elected to office. And not only did he not get elected to office, as I'd said yesterday, Harry Truman said this: he wouldn't serve in the Democrat Party organization because they were determined to put him in office regardless of what the delegates said to the Democratic Convention, of which Harry Truman was one. He just quit. He said, I'm not going to do this. And his father, Old Man Kennedy, had amassed two fortunes because he was an official of government. And when I say fortune, I mean so much money, he didn't know how much he had. He could not know. The first fortune he amassed, he did as ambassador to Britain. Ambassador to Britain. He stole so much money and got so much money doing that he had a veritable fortune. Then the second fortune he made was insider information about prohibition, and he had ships laden with booze off the coast to hit that initial release of prohibition, and people would pay high dollar for what he was shipping in from other countries. And he made a second fortune that was so great, couldn't count the money in that one either. That's how that all happened. So there are just some things that aren't debatable. You may think a guy talks good. You may like him. He may be like everybody in political office is likable, but some of them are murderous and want to destroy our country. They really do. You don't believe? Look at what you're looking at now. Do you think that the Democrats are doing something new that they didn't have in mind clear back when Woodrow Wilson was president? No, it's all the same stuff, friends. World control. The agenda has never changed. But just like Kennedy, when he was senator, he had to go along with the Birchers, the John Birchers and the McCarthyites. He had to, just to stay in office, and he did. But once he saw he didn't have to, after the election fraud that put him in office, he did as he pleased, and then he got himself killed because he didn't understand the world. He didn't understand politics. He didn't understand evil. He thought he did. When you got that much money, you think you're untouchable, and you really aren't wise. You're not fit to be president. That's what happens. That's why he says here, just another thing. Anybody that has that much money hadn't ought to be president. Okay, I get it. Because they end up cheating. The temptation is too great. What about DJ Trump? What about DJ Trump? Does he have a lot of money? What's the answer? Yes, he does. Probably, I don't know. It looks like he's got more money than he can count. But ask yourself this question. Is there a difference? Well, the first thing I ask is, did he cheat to get it? Did he get it because he was taking bribes? Was he using his position in government like old man Kennedy did in the Kennedy family? Did he use position in government to get all that wealth that he has? Easy answer, no, he didn't. He'd never run for political office in his life. He was not a politician. And because of that, he almost got wiped out his first term because he didn't understand the brutality of the game. He thought he knew. He was a New Yorker. He had played every game there was. He thought he understood human nature. Well, he understood a lot, but he didn't understand that there were those people out there that would murder him if they were given just a sliver of a chance. He understands that now. He's a veteran. He's well seasoned. You know, there's some things, if you just do them once, you become the expert because nobody else does them, ever. Just do them once. Run for president once, find out the evil empire has ways of getting at you you couldn't have thought of in 1,000 years. Now he knows. He understands the depth, the depravity of the human heart in ways he did not understand before. And I hope also his own heart. Well, there it is, friends, neighbors, and relatives. We'll start with question 211 next time. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, commonlawyer.com. Commonlawyer.com, go to the website, take advantage of the resources there. Whatever you take advantage of, we want to send it to you in appreciation of a donation. You can see how to obtain all that's there, the winterized version of the Bible, A Common Lawyer. A Common Lawyer translates the Bible from the original tongues. Original, no, not from some other translation. From the Hebrew and Aramaic of the Older Testament and the Greek, the Koine Greek of the Newer Testament. I call it toward a raw translation, raw, because I don't want to cook the book. I want to deliver it up just how I got it, how it came to me in the original tongues. It's a raw book, friends. Tells the raw truth. It's not varnished. Well, you can get that. You can get it in digital form or in hard copy. I said yesterday, you have 5 volumes, and somebody said, they typed in, said, no, it's 4 volumes. I got the 4 volumes. Well, it's 5 volumes now. I'm still working on it. 5 volumes, more than 35,000 footnotes explaining why I translate this way or that. Over 200 appendices. There wasn't over 200 when it was in 4 volumes. Why? Because I continue to work on it. It's in digital form. You can get it. You can get it in hard copy. Now, this 5 volumes, though, I hasten to add, it's not on the press yet. And whenever I want to stop and say, okay, we're going to do another edition, we'll stop and do another edition. But the 5 volumes, I ought to, Miss Francine, because it's been a year or two. I was talking to Miss Francine the other day about how long it's been since she suggested that I put out another printing, updated, because they're always updated. It just gets better all the time. Well, I don't know that it will ever stop because I'm not perfect and I can always see ways to improve my translation and the notes I have in it, the over 35,000 footnotes. Well, you can get that in digital form or hard copy. You can also get the comparative law text, Excellence of the Common Law, 958 pages. It's a big fat book, but it's comparing and contrasting our law of the land with the law of the city. The civil law, the canon civil laws of Rome with our common law tradition. The canon civil laws of Rome govern every country in the world, except the common law countries. The Code of Justinian of the Roman Empire from the 6th century. That's the fundamental law of every country in the world except the common law countries. And I compare and contrast them. It's not a complicated book. I know lawyers that look at it and say, wow, man, that's too heavy for me. Look at the size. Oh, I ain't buying that. And then I see homeschool mothers with high school diplomas reading it to their children so much every day. It's written at the fundamental level. Listen, if a book, I don't care what the book is, if it's not written to stress the fundamentals, the simplicity of the differences, it's not worth reading. You can figure out the details. Let's talk about the fundamentals. And that's what we do in that book. And by the way, we're teaching for the first time a course on the fundamentals of comparative law, the differences between the law of the land and the law of the city, our common law and the civil canon laws of Rome, called comparative law. Comparative law. There are only two traditions of religion, law, and government in the world. There's the common law tradition, and then there is the canon civil law tradition. One is from God, the other is from mere men. And you know what they are? Not much. Very dangerous creatures. I was in the desert for a long time, in the God-forsaken Alakai Desert, the Great Desert, they call it, of the western United States, prospecting for precious metals in 2 or 3 states. 3 states. I worked in 3 states. Everything in the Great American Desert that's living is poisonous. Poisonous, at least to some degree. I mean, even the prickly pear cactus, every prick on the prickly pear, every little thorn carries a bit of poison in it. Yeah, everything. The Gila monsters, they're all, they'll kill you, they'll chew on you. They won't let go till the next 4th of July. They're like snapping turtles in the Wabash Valley. The Mojave green rattling snake, the rattlers, the most deadly species, they're there. The Mojave. Little boogers, and ugly. Like back home, like timber rattlers, they never stop growing. They're deadly, but not like those little Mojaves. Woo, Nelly. It's all over but the crying if they hit you. And then the javelina. The javelina. You don't want to get ripped up by one of them. They look like pigs, but they ain't. They're really rodents. But they look like razorbacks, and they got sharp tusks growing up out of their lower jaw, and they're filthy. They got so much dangerous bacteria in their mouths that if one of those tusks rip you up, it'll get infected. You'll be lucky if you live. And then over 165 species of scorpions. They can flatten themselves out and crawl under the smallest little sliver in your door, come in your house. I got tired one time, flopped down the carpet, laying there, opened my eyes, and here's a scorpion right in front of my face with his tail up, cocked and loaded to strike. I got up one morning, looked in the mirror, went in where the sink was, grabbed a brush. I was going to brush my hair back real quick, and I brushed my hair, and I was looking in the mirror, and there was a scorpion on the brush. I mean to say, everything in the desert is poisonous. Poisonous to the worst degree, some of them. Some of it just a little bit. But if you land on a prickly pear, cactus, you get hundreds or thousands of those pricking you. I knew a lady that became a quadriplegic because of the massive amount of poison come from those prickly pear, landing in a big patch of it. She was thrown off the back of a D8 dozer, or a D9, I believe. Well, my point is, all that poisonous stuff out there. But you know what I've discovered? Of all the living things in the desert, it was more poisonous, more dangerous. You can't fathom how dangerous this creature is. And that was the 2-legged creature out there called man. That was, when all that other stuff put together, that's the one you had to watch. Here, this is Brent Allen Winters.